Pilgrim's Rest Channel. Welcome to Pilgrim's Rest Channel. Our aim here is, well, it's quite specific. We want to introduce you, spiritual seekers, pilgrims on this journey, to some really enduring spiritual resources, books, ideas from ages past, things that can offer, rest, supply, maybe some renewed strength for what can be a pretty challenging path.
Absolutely. And today we're digging into a truly critical work for understanding the inner life. It's Andrew Murray's Humility, the Beauty of Holiness.
Right. If you're searching for maybe the text that really identifies the absolute root of discipleship, this might just be it.
It's certainly a strong contender.
Let's start with the man himself, Andrew Murray. He lived quite a while ago, 1828 to 1917, a South African writer, teacher, pastor, and incredibly prolific.
Oh, incredibly. His legacy is just immense. I mean, think about it. Over 2 million copies of his books sold. That's staggering.
And he's mentioned in the same breath as, giants like Charles Spurgeon, D.L. Moody.
Exactly. So why humility? What makes this particular book so vital? Murray doesn't just list humility as one good trait among others. No, he raises the stakes much higher.
Much higher. He calls it the overriding virtue.
Yes, and the only root from which the graces can grow. The only root.
That's a huge claim.
Yeah.
And his basic idea, his thesis, is that the Christian life often feels lacking, maybe. It suffers loss, he says.
Because believers haven't really grasped what humility truly is. They haven't seen it as the one indispensable condition for real fellowship with Jesus.
Okay, indispensable. So how do we start to grasp it then?
Yeah.
He talks about motives for humility.
He does. He lays out 3 great motives. Humility, he says, fits us, first as a creature, second as a sinner, and third as a saint.
Now, I think most of us, myself included, probably jump straight to number 2, the sinner part.
That's the common view, isn't it? We tend to think humility means constantly focusing on our sins or flaws.
Right. Feeling bad about ourselves, maybe. But Murray pushes back on that a bit, doesn't he?
He does. He argues that putting too much weight on the sinner aspect can actually be misleading. It might make you think that constant self-condemnation or even continuing to sin somehow keeps you humble.
Which sounds wrong.
It is. And here's where he drops a surprising truth bomb. He says, "It is not sin that humbles us the most,
Okay.
but grace."
Grace humbles us more than sin. That definitely goes against the grain. So if it's not mostly about, dwelling on our faults, what's the foundation?
It's about accepting our place as creatures. That's the first duty, he says. The very nature of being created means we are absolutely universally dependent on God.
So humility is just agreeing to that, consenting to be nothing.
Exactly. Consenting to be nothing so that God can be all. That's humility in its essence.
So pride isn't just like thinking too highly of yourself. It's a deeper rejection, a rejection of being dependent.
Precisely. It's refusing to be that empty vessel waiting to be filled by God. Murray calls our dependence the root of every good thing. And pride.
The root of every sin.
Yes. If pride, that desire to be independent from God, was the poison from the first Adam, then redemption has to be about restoring that lost dependence.
Okay, so if pride is the core problem, the deepest poison, where does Murray point us for the antidote? Is it about what Christ did or who he was?
It's fundamentally about who he was. Which brings us to the next really crucial section of the book. Christ's own humility as the secret of redemption.
The secret of redemption.
And Murray is very clear. Understanding why we even need redemption depends entirely on grasping the, quote, terrible nature of pride.
And he says something really profound about Jesus, the second Adam.
He does. He states that Christ's defining characteristic, the absolute root and essence of his identity as our Redeemer, is his humility.
Wow.
He puts it beautifully. Christ is the humility of God embodied in human nature.
The humility of God embodied. That's a lot to take in. Humility is the divine nature, choosing dependence to save us.
And you see this dependence lived out moment by moment. His incarnation becoming human, his life of service, his obedience right up to death on a cross.
All radical humility.
Totally radical.
Yeah.
And his teaching just reinforces this. He constantly points away from himself towards the Father, especially, in the Gospel of John.
Yeah, I remember those lines. Things like, the Son can do nothing of himself.
Yeah.
Just stated plainly.
Exactly. That complete reliance. Or think about when he says, "I came down from heaven not to do my own will, but the will of him that sent me." Total self-renunciation.
And seeking no personal glory, he says, "I seek not my own glory."
Christ was nothing, deliberately, so the Father could be everything through him. And that life, that absolute submission, that's what he achieved for us, and it's what he offers to us. That's salvation.
Okay, so we've got the theological foundation, the example of Christ.
hmm
But humility has to be practical, right? It can't just stay up in the clouds.
Absolutely not. And Murray brings it right down to earth. He says the real test, the proof of whether our humility before God is genuine.
Where is it found?
It's found in the insignificant matters of daily life, how we treat other people.
That's where the rubber meets the road.
Completely. He says our humility towards others is the only sufficient proof of our humility before God. He even references that passage in 1 John. If you don't love your brother whom you've seen, how can you claim to love or be humble before God whom you haven't seen?
Ouch. Yeah, that hits hard. Because we all know those daily moments, the irritation, the quick judgment, feeling slighted.
Exactly. Someone cuts you off, a colleague takes credit, you feel misunderstood. Murray is blunt. Lack of love, touchiness, sharp judgments, bitterness. The root is always pride. Nothing else.
So if I'm easily offended, maybe my humility isn't as deep as I thought.
That's what he'd suggest. And this practical relational humility, it's also the ground, the necessary soil where faith can actually grow.
How does he connect humility and faith?
He points to Jesus's question in John's Gospel. How can you believe if you're busy taking glory from one another instead of seeking the glory that comes only from God?
Right, because faith itself is basically admitting we're helpless, that we have nothing in ourselves.
Precisely. It's a confession of need, of emptiness. So pride, which is self-sufficiency, and faith, which is reliance on God, they just can't coexist. They're fundamentally incompatible.
Which leads to maybe one of the most subtle dangers he warns about, especially for those of us really trying to grow spiritually.
Yes, the pride of holiness.
The pride of holiness. That sounds dangerous because it's so hidden. How would that even show up?
Well, Murray says the acid test of genuine holiness is whether it produces increasing humility, not decreasing humility or static humility, increasing.
Okay.
So if your spiritual journey, your growth in discipline or knowledge starts leading you to subtly, maybe even unconsciously, compare yourself favorably to others.
Like the Pharisee in the temple. God, I thank you, I'm not like those people.
Exactly like the Pharisee in Luke's gospel. If that attitude creeps in, then pride has actually infected your pursuit of sanctity. It's become about you, not God.
And that's got to be the sneakiest pride of all, wearing spiritual clothes.
It really is. True humility, the actual mark of developing holiness, shows itself differently. It looks like kindness, compassion, being willing to submit, persevering with difficult people, treating everyone with grace, regardless of where they are spiritually.
So what's the takeaway for believers today? Why does this matter so much for the church, for us?
Murray's conclusion on this is pretty stark. He basically argues that the absence of this deep, Christ-like humility is the secret reason why God's power often seems limited in the church, in our lives.
Because we're still trying to do things in our own strength, relying on ourselves.
Yes, we haven't truly learned, or perhaps aren't willing to demonstrate, that core truth Jesus embodied. We can do nothing of ourselves. Only when we get low can God truly work.
Getting low. Which brings us to this paradox he talks about. The path of humility actually leads to exaltation. How does that work? It seems counterintuitive.
It does, but think about the Apostle Paul. His thorn in the flesh, that weakness he begged God to remove.
Right, in 2 Corinthians.
And what did he learn? He learned to glory in his weaknesses, because that's when Christ's power rested on him most fully. Accepting weakness allowed for divine strength.
So accepting weakness, embracing humility, that's the path to what Murray calls death to self.
Yes, but he's careful here. It's not about fighting against yourself and your own strength. That's still self-effort, isn't it? Still pride, in a way.
Okay, so how do we do it?
Through humble self-surrender. His advice is to sink down into your own nothingness. Just rest there, in a spirit of meekness, patience, trustful surrender to God.
So our job is the humbling. God's job is the lifting up.
That's the division of labor, you could say. The command, like in the book of James, is clear. Humble yourselves in the sight of the Lord.
And he shall lift you up. Our part, his part.
Exactly. It's a command with a promise attached. And here's the final beautiful insight, the real golden thought of the book, perhaps. The exaltation God promises isn't about becoming famous or powerful in the world's eyes. It's something internal. It's the gift of more humility, a deeper indwelling of that humble spirit of Christ.
So being lifted up means becoming more humble.
Yes, because that deeper humility allows God to be more fully glorified in us. The lower we go, the emptier we become of self, the faster and fuller the inflow of God's presence and glory.
What a powerful, liberating paradox that is.
Yeah.
We started by seeing that Christ himself is our humility. It's not just something we try to do, but something he gives us.
And his grace is truly sufficient to conquer pride if we'll cooperate, if we'll yield. The path to the highest spiritual life isn't climbing, it's descending into self-surrender.
Amazing. So perhaps the provocative thought to leave everyone with is this. Maybe we should stop fighting against the things that humble us.
Maybe even choose them. Choose to be weak, choose to be low, choose to embrace being nothing in ourselves.
Because paradoxically, that's the secret to real happiness and the pathway for Christ's power to flow through us.
That's the heart of Murray's message.
Thank you for listening to Pilgrim's Rest Channel. See you next time. We hope this deep dive into Andrew Murray's humility gives you some rest and supply for your own pilgrimage. Oh, hope to meet again.